WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Okay, so another Elementor Facebook community, so in this case the Building Business with Elementor community, answer to a question. So Yasser asked here, how do we get this type of background animation when you scroll the page? So it's not a mouse over by the look of it, it's actually when you scroll it triggers the animation. When working this out, I realized there's actually two parts to this answer. The first one is how do we trigger animations to occur while they're inside the viewport and repeat that. The Elementor entry effects only play once they're played, that's it. So it does not do what we're looking for to here unless you actually add some extra code which removes and adds classes. I've come up with what I think is a better way. It's using native code. It's not using GSAP or Waypoints or anything like that. It's using what they call the IntersectionObserver, which is a built-in browser API. I'll look at that and show you how we can actually make this work. And then the second part would be how do we actually make the background grow effect on the section like this. I've got a couple of ideas that I want to look at with that. So the first video I'm going to do is going to be on how do we trigger the animations. I'll do a second one so that the tutorial doesn't get confusing because they're two separate concepts that kind of work together. So heading over to a dummy test page that I've made, I've got some buffer text at the top so we can scroll. And if I scroll down, see this little animation that animates in? And if I move up, it animates out. So as it gets to within 200, if this leaves within 200 pixels of the top of the viewport, then animate out. It's within 200 pixels in, then animate in, same as the bottom. So we stay there, we stay there, we stay there, gets to the bottom. This is doing that because I haven't got any overflow hidden and it's actually re-triggering the animation. If I basically go past it, so we'd fix that by setting overflow to hidden on this section here. But the idea is that we're triggering the animation. So if I go further down, I've got two more boxes and they come in. This one's coming in 1 second. That one's taking 1.5 seconds. It just takes a little bit longer. So watch this. There's a slight delay on the right-hand side just because we've made the length a little bit longer. So this is all without GSAP. This is basically using standard CSS animations, telling it to trigger so that it is in the basically what you'd normally call the hovered state or the active state while it's within 200 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the bottom. Once it gets outside of that, then animate out. Now you can set it so that it's 0. I like to see the animation sort of triggering to go out before it leaves the viewport. If you set it to 0, it'll take the animation off outside the viewport and then apply it when you're in. Kind of like this idea of it disappearing as you scroll like that. So that's kind of where we're working on today. That's just the code to make this bit work. And then we'll use that to apply the background growing effect in the second video. So heading over to the IntersectionObserver. If you do a Google search for IntersectionObserver, the first one you'll find is this MDN doc, and it explains what the IntersectionObserver does. It's pretty simple once you understand it. Effectively, it takes a box. In this case, they put an example of a scroll area. I won't do that because that assumes you've got a fixed box, like a fixed position box, and you want to watch when things scroll past it. So you might have like a box in the middle here, and you want it to trigger when elements enter or leave that box. If you set this to null, I think it is, or false, I think it's null, it uses the entire viewport, which is what we're going to use. And then the root margin is the margin from that box that you want to trigger in. Now, it's a little bit different than you'd expect. This is actually set as like you would a standard CSS margin, but you can only use pixels or percentage, and it's the top, right, bottom, left. So you can specify all of them. We're only going to worry about vertical, so our bottom and left always, our right and left are always going to be 0 pixels, and then we're going to look at the top and bottom. Now, it works a little bit opposite to what you would expect. So when you set if I set that to 100 pixels, it's within 100 pixels from the top outside the viewport. If I set it to minus 100 pixels, it's a minus 100 pixels, so it's inside the viewport. So if you want to trigger at a box that's inside the viewport by, say, 200 pixels from the top, 200 pixels from the bottom, you have to set the top and bottom margins to minus 200 pixels. The threshold is how much of the element, let's say this box here is the element that we want to track, how much of that element needs to be inside that viewport. The threshold of 1 means the whole element needs to be inside that viewport. So if I was at this point here, the whole element's not inside that viewport, so it doesn't trigger yet. If I was at this point here, the whole element is inside that 200 pixel margin, so it's going to trigger. I typically set this to a very low number, so like 0.01 or 0.001, because I want it to trigger as soon as any part of this element hits that viewport point there. So 200 pixels down, any part of this hits that. So if we're at the top here, and as soon as the bottom of this hits that 200 pixel viewport, I want it to trigger. So I set the threshold very, very low for that reason. So that's all we need to talk about with this. You can look at this and get some more details on how that works if you want. Heading over to our actual code. Now, I've put this code in, I've got Elementor Pro. I've put it under Elementor custom code. And in here, I've just created a class called, a code block called add animation class in viewport. If we edit that, so this code here works, the conditionals work very similarly to the other templates where you've got conditions. I've got it set to the entire site. You can specifically put this on pages. Now, one bug with this that's been a bug forever that Elementor just have not fixed yet is if you want to disable this code block and you get rid of your condition, it doesn't work. It puts it on every single page. So if you don't have a condition, like if I only want it on a particular page, a particular page here, where are we? Pages, and I select a particular page, so animate. If I only want that code on this page, that works. If I take that off, it puts it on every single page. So in this case, I want on the entire site anyway. So that's just one bug with this. So the only way around that is to set it to draft. So you just use it as a standard post and set it to draft, and then it won't put it on the page. That's just a little bug that Elementor still need to fix. Now, I'm only using this because it's built into Elementor Pro. I have a preference for a different way of doing this, but it's a paid plugin, so I'm just going to show you here. So you might have your own code manager. By all means, stick it in there. Now, one of my other bugbears with this is ES6 syntax has been available in modern browsers for quite some time now, but all of the Elementor code block editors all warn you about ES6 functions. It looks annoying. I thought at first that I had problems with my code, and then I've realized that it's actually just Elementor's code highlighting, and they need to fix this and update this to bring it into the 21st century. So here's my code, and what I'm doing is I always set my variables and constants at the top here. So the target element selector is WPG reanimate. Make this whatever you want. So any element that I put this class on, I want to initialize to track when it's within the viewport. Simple as that. So if I head over to my actual editing page, where are we? Over here. And this first icon box here, I just add that WPG reanimate it, and now it will track that particular icon box when it's within that viewport. Okay. Then we say, well, what class do we want to add when it's considered to be within the viewport that we want to animate? And I'm just making that in-view. Okay. My default top is minus 200 pixels, and my default bottom is minus 200 pixels. As I've described, it's 200 pixels from the top, 200 pixels from the bottom. It has to be minus for that to work properly. All right, I'm adding an event listener to listen for the DOM content loaded. That is just to make sure that all of the elements are on the page before this runs. That's all that's for. I can get rid of that because I'm using this code editor. I can put that as a priority 10 or whatever. I can make sure this is at the bottom of the page, and I don't need to wait for that to end it. I can just call in it straight away. I like to do this because then I know no matter where I stick this code, it's going to wait for all of the HTML and JavaScript to be ready before it actually runs. Okay, so all I'm doing with that is calling my init, where I get a collection. So I'm calling the document, which I'm referencing as D through my closure here and my anonymous function. So just a shorthand way of doing it. So document, query selector all, the target element selector. So anything with WPG, reanimate. I'm going to iterate through each one of those, and I'm going to tell it to initialize by calling this init element function, passing in the element with the WPG reanimate. So for example, this icon box, it will pass that in and initialize that. All right, I'm going to come back to the section here where I'm working out the top and bottom. I'll skip over that for now. So all I'm doing is initializing my observer. So this piece here, so I'm setting my root to null so that it's the entire viewport. And setting my root margin based on whatever I've calculated up here. So by default, it's going to be top, right, bottom, left. So it'll be minus 200 pixels, 0, minus 200 pixels, 0. Okay, so that's going to be that. And I'm telling it I only need 0.1 of the element to be within that viewport before I want to trigger. That's the options that we set. We create an observer. And with an observer, there is a callback. So basically it's a new observer, so creating a new instance of the intersection observer, and the callback that we want to call passes in two properties, which is the entries and the observer itself, which we don't need the observer itself. Okay, so we're going to pass through all the entries. Now what this is the observer can actually observe multiple elements. One observer can observe multiple elements and trigger when they're in or out of the viewport. The reason I haven't done that with just grabbing all of them and setting the observer to observe all of them is because I want to be able to, on every single one, I want to be able to vary where it triggers. So I need a different observer for each element, because some elements I might want to view the viewport to be 200 pixels from the top. Others I don't want to see animate at all, so I might set them to 0 at the top so that I don't see the animation being removed and it animates as soon as it comes back in. I want to be able to control each element, which is why I'm creating an observer for each element. So I've got a console log here just so we can see when the observer triggers, which we'll look at. Now the entry has a property is intersecting. Let's go back to the intersection observer and have a look there. Okay, here we go. So it shows us just what is in our entry. So what is the rectangle, the ratio, intersection rectangle, so how much of it intersects, what is the target, and is it intersecting? So is intersecting means that our element, and say if we're elementing this box here, this is within 200 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the bottom, so it is intersecting. Once it's outside of that, it's not intersecting anymore. Okay, once that disappears outside of there, then is intersecting is now false. We're just looking at it, is it intersecting? If it is, we're going to add the InView class. Our InView class is InView, in-view. If it's not intersecting, remove the InView class. And then all we have to do, so that's setting up our observer with our callback, and then we just have to tell the observer to observe this particular element that we passed in. So in this case, the icon box widget that we passed in is going to observe using that observer. So that's pretty much that. Now I'll come back to these as I said, but I'm going to show you what that actually does. I'll spread my Chrome DevTools and just clear my... At the moment you can see I've got nothing in the console. As I scroll, see that element came in and my intersection observer just console logged that. Is intersecting is true. All right. So my target is that icon box widget. We're not going to worry about all the other stuff just yet. All we're looking at is it intersecting? Whoops. Is it intersecting? Yes or no? So that's true. All right, now let's move that outside of the viewport so it disappears. Have a look at this next one that's logged, where we've got is intersecting equals false. It's as simple as that. True or false, add or remove the class. Now actually have a look at what our JavaScript is doing to this icon box widget. So that's the icon box widget there. And if we look at these classes here, we've got in view there. So we've got our WPG reanimate here, which is what I manually added, and that's just so that it tracks it. Okay, and we've got an in view class added to that. Now watch happens, watch this line down here when I go out of view. See, we've still got our WPG reanimate, but the in view is gone. We come back into view. We've now got our in view again. So all we're doing really is tracking when is this tracking within a viewport, and when it's within the viewport, add in view. When it's outside of the viewport, remove in view. All right, so that's pretty simple, right? So let's go over to look at our actual build. Now, all I've done on this icon box is add WPG reanimate. That's all I've had to do to that to make this work. And then the JavaScript over here will pick that up, add it to its intersection observers, and watch when it goes in and out of the viewport. And then when it's in the viewport, it adds the in view class. It's as simple as that. Now, how do we animate it? So inside so we're still looking at the icon box widget. And what we do is look at the custom CSS. Now, I'll put it straight on this widget. If this is going to be a animation you're going to use in multiple locations, you would create a class for this. So instead of using selector, you'd create a unique class name, and you'd take this out of the widget and you'd put it wherever you manage your site-wide custom CSS. So whether you use a child theme, whether you use Elementor's code blocks, whether you use code snippets, or whatever you use, wherever you put this, you would create a unique class name instead of the keyword selector. So selector just means it's targeting that one widget. We add a class name to that instead, and then up in the layout, we add that extra class name. So this could be animate down or fade down, fade in, down. Okay, so if we made that fade in down, then we go back to our, whoops, editor's doing funny things. Grab that, and I'm going to change that selector keyword to dot fade in down, and that anywhere I've used the selector keyword. Change that now. So instead of using selector, I've used fade in down. Now I can actually take this entire block of code and take it out of the widget and put it anywhere because we're using a class. Okay, I'm just going to update that just to make sure it's still working. Okay, there we go, it's still working. Okay, so that's pretty much my development process, is to work on the widget or on the page, create your custom CSS on there. Then when you're done, change it to a class name, and then you can move that out of here and use it on others. So now any other widget icon box like this, like if I added another one, let's add another one. Like, see, let's just duplicate that. Okay, and look at this here. Now I don't need, got those two classes. I don't need all the custom CSS on this one because it's already existing. So if I update that, my first one, there's my second one. So they both work because all we now have to do is to use that is on anyone we want to use it on, we just add these two classes, WPG reanimate and fade in down. So when it reanimates, puts the in view, then it's going to use this fade in down class here. All right, so that's pretty much how I would do those. Now, The next one further down is exactly the same thing. So if I go down to this icon box down here, and I've just got all this buffer text so we can scroll, I've done exactly the same thing. So it's got WPG reanimate. In the custom CSS, there's my custom CSS. And all I'm doing that is, I should actually mention too, I've got a method up here to reset in the editor. So because we're waiting for some JavaScript to run, and I don't want it to run in the editor, we're not going to see anything happen here. So if I start my starting point at opacity 0, let's say I take this out here, I can't see what I'm working on. So when I'm looking at when the editor's active, I just want to reset those properties to opacity 1, scale of 1. When it's in the front end, this doesn't apply. So the opacity is 0 to start with a scale of 0.5. Let's do the same with this one. So let's call this, where are we? I'm going to call this rotate fade in. I've got a class now called rotate fade in. If I go to my custom CSS and I replace everything that says selector with rotate fade in, okay, chuck that there and chuck that there. Now on the second one, let's change this one. So now to get the second one working, I'm going to actually oops, go to the first one. And my rotate fade in, get rid of all of my CSS on that one. So all I've got on this second icon box are these two classes, those two classes there. Okay, update that. Okay, and we've got these two rotating in and out. So going out of view, in view. Go to the top, rotates out, comes back in. All right, now to tidy all this up, I'm going to show you what I mean by pulling all the CSS out. So if I just go to, there I've got no CSS on that one. Here's my CSS rule here. I've got to copy all that, cut all that out of there. I'm going to go back over to my code block. Just for now, I'm going to stick it in here so that it's global. So I've got my style here that I've just taken off that widget and I've stuck it into some global code here. Again, this could be anywhere. It could be in your site settings, custom CSS, could be in your child theme, could be in here, whatever you want. Okay, so I'm going to update that. Update this. Now, back to the front end and do a Control F5. It's still working. All right. So let's actually show you an example here where all I'm going to do is grab these two classes here. I'm going to delete these two. And I'm going to grab a, I don't know, or might put a text editor there, add the two classes to that. I might add another widget. Let's make it a, I don't know, what can we put there? Maybe we'll stick an image there. Okay, and pick something. My light bulb maybe. And we're going to add the class to that as well. So we're going to, all we've done with this image and this text box is put the CSS classes on for WPG reanimate and rotate fade in. Okay, over in our code, we've got our, we're looking for anything that's got WPG reanimate, and we've got a some classes here for rotate fade in our styles. All right, so let's update that. You can see why I've split this, because this is a lot to cover and try, and then we're going to look at the backgrounds as well. So There we go. So we've got an image and a text box rotating and fading in just by adding those two classes. Go outside the viewport and they rotate out. All right, so that's pretty much how I do this. It's very simple. It uses native browser APIs. It doesn't require any third-party libraries, and it works nicely. So I think it's a great way of doing it. So I'm going to finish here. I'll put this code up. Now, my next tutorial, I'll look at that actual background that we were looking at over here. Now that we know how to trigger these animations, we'll then look at these, how to actually make an animation for the background. Okay, so we'll be back soon.